Hey everybody, Tyree here with Before I Forget, along with the greatest host in the history of hosts, Mr. Kevin. Say hey, Kevin.
Hey, Kevin.
And he has an extremely special guest for you guys to hear today. You want to go ahead and introduce?
So, so here's the deal, y'all. This guy that we have coming on the show today is a legend of legends, right? Not just a legend in general, a legend of legends. Like this guy is above and beyond all the things that anybody who's served in the United States Army or the United States military knows about the expectations of what like a true soldier is. A career spanning 3 decades. And there's a lot that I could say about him, but I'm gonna let him talk about himself because we want to hear it straight from the man's mouth. Sergeant Major Mike Vining.
Hello. First of all, I want to apologize to the listeners the viewers out there, because right now my video seems to be frozen, but I'm here with you. Thanks for the introduction.
Yeah, I'm still working on introductions. It's not my strong suit for sure, but I'm just really excited to be able to have this opportunity to speak with you because I've heard stories about what you and your comrades did back in the day, and I've the meme of you. I'm sure you're aware of the memes surrounding you. I've seen those floating around for years, and I never thought in my life that I would be able to sit down and be able to speak to you. So this is like it really is like such a great honor to be here on my side. So yeah, and don't worry about the whole video thing. I mean, it is what it is. I'm just excited to hear stories.
Hey,
Well, yeah, the meme thing. I think that meme started around 2000 and maybe 2008 or something like that. I joined a website called Army Together We Serve
Mm-hmm.
website. It's there's Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard. They're all tied together. So I put my information on the website Army Together We Serve, because on that website you can put in what unit you were in and the time period that you were in, and other people that are on the website uh, it will show you that what other people that you served with on the website. And it's a great website, the Together We Serve websites, to do remembrance profiles. I have several people that I have put remembrance profiles on, including family members that served in the military.
Oh, that's cool. I've never actually heard of that. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
And part of my bad introductions, I didn't even mention what unit you were a part of. But I will say this to our listeners and viewers: he was part of the unit. And if you're familiar with things in the Army, the unit only refers to one unit, and yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, we just call ourselves the unit. The full name is First Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta Airborne. That's the full name, or First SFOD Delta. But we just call ourselves the unit. Uh, Other people know us by various different names. CAG is one common name and that was one of our cover names, and it was the Combat Application Group. Uh, we had several of them. One was See Me. Uh, what was See Me? That was really funny, and yeah, but either we call ourselves the unit.
so. I gotta say, so I'm in the Army Reserves. I'm a drill sergeant in the reserves, and it's funny to me because whenever we have group chats and everything, and when we refer to our company, people will be like, yeah, so we're gonna meet at the unit, or hey, why don't you come over to the unit, or hey, we're talking about recruiting somebody. It's like, hey, why don't you recruit them into the unit? I'm like, and it always reminds me of, you know, Delta and how you guys refer to yourselves as the unit, and I'm like, we're not the unit, we're just a unit in the reserves.
Yeah. Well, it's the unit's simpler than the whole
right.
formalized name. Um, yeah, so I went to the unit in 1978, the spring of, I think it was March of 78 when I first went to the unit. And I can tell you how that story went. If that's where you would like to start, or would you like to start at the beginning of my career?
I have a question before we get into all that stuff. Uh, Being a part of something so secretive initially, what is it like to, uh, and to go back to be a meme, to be something that's everywhere, to have your face plastered on many, many different internet websites?
Yeah, I
That
I
like,
don't know how it all got started. Like I say, I posted on the Together We Serve. I posted some uh, pictures of me. My one of them, of course, is my retirement photo that was taken a couple of months before I retired, and that started. Somebody took it off probably off the website, and that started circulating. And at first, people didn't know who I really was. I seemed to pop up out of nowhere because I've been on the black side for, gosh, several years on the black side. And so there was a lot of speculation of who I was, and, and then, and then there was even, some speculation that I could have been um, a stolen valor type thing, with all my different types of cross mix of badges and stuff. One was the placement, the order of my badges on my uniform. The EOD, the Master EOD badge, was one of the lower ranking badges as it was placed on my uniform. And of course, that made some questions. Why wasn't it above the airborne parachutist badge, which it is now? But that regulation change didn't take place until 2002. Before that, the Master EOD badge was a category into category 5. And now it has moved up to category 2. It should have always been a category 2, but because it's a lot harder to earn the EOD badge than it is to, the airborne badge, for an example.
Right.
All you got to do is make 5 jumps out of an airplane. But the EOD badge, it's about 6 months of schooling. It's one of the hardest schools academically in the military. We have a washout rates quite high. And then, unlike the other badges, in order for the EOD badge to be a permanent award, you have to serve in the EOD unit for 18 months. Whereas the other badges, when you earn them, whether it be a combat, air assault badge or a parachutist badge, it's a permanent award upon completion of the school. But EOD, you have to be a permanent award 18 months.
Well, and I'm looking at the picture that I think you're talking about in your dress screens, the one that was actually turned into a meme,
Uh-huh.
that says, "Do you you don't operate, do you, son?"
Yeah, I don't know who did that. That was cute, and also the term that's always been, how did the term operator originate too? That was I've seen articles on the internet explaining the term operator and how it was applied. And, you know, when we would, after selection and assessment, you would go to the operator training course.
Mm-hmm.
It's about a 5-month long operator training course. But in the operator training course, you learn all kinds of skills, skills that are outside the normal, what you usually do for the military. Uh, you learn how to pick locks. You go through classes. We had photography classes. We learned how to develop film, slides and do film developing when we had film cameras before the digital cameras, and we just we even had classes on how to steal vehicles, to hot wire and steal vehicles. Um, when we went into Iran, we had hot wire kits. We carried those on us to, if we got caught in Iran during the Iran hostage rescue mission and we had to E&E, we would have to steal cars. We were taught, which are the cars that are the easiest cars to steal. So those are some of the different things. We learned trade craft, how to do dead drops. It's just the whole gamut of things you had to learn through the operator training course. And of course, we have a saying in Delta too, is selection is a never ending process. Just because you go through selection assessment, it's every day.
Right. Well, and for our listeners and viewers that don't know, you were a part of the very first operator training course in 1978.
Yeah, I went to the first one. I was in the EOD, and I was in the conventional EOD unit, the 63rd at Fort Leonard Wood, and I had gone through EMT training. There was an accident with an IED, and the person I was with was killed at Quincy, Illinois. It was domestic terrorism where they had planted a bunch of bombs in Quincy, Illinois in 1976. And one of the bombs failed to go off, and the person I was working with went down on the bomb and it detonated while he was down there. And I was the first person to him, and that was a Master Sergeant promotable, Ken Foster. But he was killed immediately, and there was nothing I could do. But I figured that I needed better medical training, in this type of job, explosive ordnance disposal. So I went through an EMT course, college course, nationally registered as an EMT. And so I figured with that, I would go to special forces as a medic. So I put in a paperwork to be a special forces medic. I had a class date all set up to go. Everything was fine. And then I get a telephone call from my sergeant major at our control detachment. And he says, Mike, he knew I was leaving EOD, going into special forces. And he said that they're forming a new unit at Fort Bragg. And they're looking for at least 6 EOD folks to be part of the new unit, NCOs, E5 promotables, E6, E7, if they have combat experience, preferably. And I was, served in Vietnam. So they're looking for EOD folks in this new unit at Fort Bragg. So he gave me the telephone number. I called. They said, can you come for an interview? 2 days later, I think it was, I flew to Fort Bragg. I went to the old stockade there on Butner Road and did my interview. I interviewed with Colonel Charlie Beckwith. Within a short period of time, I PCSed to Fort Bragg, and OTC-1 was just starting. They had already the unit had set up in about October of 1977, and they ran a fall selection course. And so those people that went through the fall selection course were going to go to OTC-1. But I had just got in there, and there was 5 other EOD guys that were there, and they decided to put us right into OTC-1. And then after OTC, we would have to do the selection and assessment, and we would have to pass the selection and assessment. So we immediately started in OTC-1, but only two of the 5 EOD folks, only 2 of us made it through OTC 1. Then they were starting OTC 2 right after OTC 1, and there was 5 EOD folks in OTC 2, and only 2 of them made it through. So in the fall of 1978, we had to do selection and assessment, and we were still doing it in Uwharrie National Forest in North Carolina. So of the 4 of us that went through selection assessment, only 3 of us made it through.
Dang.
And then we had to go to jump school. So we kind of did everything backwards. And in the first OTC 1 and OTC 2, primarily it was composed of special forces, MACV SOCs, veterans, rangers. But Beckwith, his vision was MOS is immaterial. To have a counter-terrorist organization, you need people of different skills. You need somebody that can operate a bulldozer. If we need a bulldozer to be we need somebody to drive a tractor trailer. We need somebody to pretend that they're a chef, a cook. We need all kinds of people with different skills, not just Ranger Special Forces background. So he opened it up MOS wide to recruit. And he wanted the EOD people to be operators, but just have the EOD skill set. And he wanted 6 of us, but we only got 3 of us got through. So then what we did, we had some, back then, this is before the 18 series. It was the Special Forces was 12 Bravo. So we had 3 12 Bravo guys, Special Forces. They were E7s, and they volunteered to go to EOD school. But you couldn't go to EOD school as E7s because you had to be at E5 or lower to go to EOD school. So these 3 E7 Special Forces 12Bs, they just pinned on E5 stripes and went to EOD school at Indian Head, Maryland at the time, but made an agreement with the school that they would not be awarded the MOS, and that they would not be, because they're E7s, they would not be awarded the MOS, nor would they be awarded the EOD badge, because like I said, you have to be in an EOD in 18 months to be a permanent award. But these 3 guys went through, so now we had 6 guys that were operators and with the EOD background, and the 3 12B guys would be our support if we encountered an improvised explosive device. So that was the start.
That is
That's just the
you're right. So that's that to me. Okay, so that is in my mind. So Tyree and I were both infantry when we were active duty, and so we hear stories all the time of operators and SF guys, and everybody doing all these crazy things, and you hear all these, like, you never know if they're true or not. Just these rumors that, like, oh, they can do this and they can do that, and that is kind of right up there with that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, hey, we're just gonna be E7s. We're gonna have them pin on E5. They're gonna go to the school. Yeah, I don't know. It's like blending in with the regular army to accomplish some task. But so before all of that, though, so you came in the army in 1968 and you went EOD. You weren't a draftee, right? You said I wanted to.
I was 17 years old. I was 2 weeks out of high school,
right.
and I volunteered so I was 17 when I went into the army. And I talked to the Army recruiter, and I wanted to go into Explosive Ordnance Disposal, EOD. But back then, you could not enlist for EOD. You had to go in as some other MOS, and from that MOS, you could volunteer for EOD. So the recruiter told me that if I went in this, and back then EOD was a 55 series, today it's an 89 series. So he told me it was 55 Delta. So if I went in the Army as a 55 Charlie, which was 55 Charlie was ammunition renovation, the maintenance and renovation of ammunition. fixing ammunition, unserviceable ammunition to make it serviceable again. And he said that, and it was at Redstone Arsenal, Alabama. He says, from there, I can volunteer, give me a good start on EOD with ammunition, and I can volunteer for EOD. And the reason you couldn't enlist for EOD is because of the high washout rate. So if you went to EOD school and you failed, then the Army could, you already have an MOS, and the Army could immediately reassign you, send you to, Korea, Germany, Vietnam. So I went to the 55 Charlie school, and back then, 55 Charlies, one of their jobs was to dispose of Code H ammunition. Code H ammunition is ammunition that's unserviceable and uneconomical to repair. So you destroy it by blowing it up. Today, EOD does that job. But back then, 55 Charlies did it. And you'd go to but EOD, you were instructed how to destroy ammunition with EOD instructors at Redstone. And so then they asked for volunteers, and I volunteered for EOD. Phase one of EOD was, at that time, was Fort McClellan, Alabama, where you learned about chemical and biological munitions. Then you go to phase two at Indian Head, Maryland, Naval Ordnance Station. Indian Head, Maryland was established as the EOD school in 1947 when Department of Defense was created. The proponent for EOD training is the Navy. So we have, like, proponent for airborne training is the Army, and so on, like that. Navy diving's now for diving, but so Navy is the proponent for the basic EOD training. Each service has more specialized training, the service particular. So Indian Head, and then after Indian Head, I went to Tech Escort at Edgewood Arsenal. And so that was an interesting experience to be in Tech Escort. And I still in contact with a lot of those guys from that time period in Tech Escort. And then from Tech Escort, I volunteered for Vietnam. That's my ultimate goal, was to go to Vietnam. So I put in 3 requests to go to Vietnam, and my commanding officer disapproved the first 2. Finally, when I put in the third request, he approved it. I guess he figured I was determined. So that's my ultimate goal, was to go to Vietnam as an EOD person, and that's where I could learn my field. And I did. That 1 year in Vietnam was a tremendous learning experience. I was with the 99th Ordnance Detachment EOD at Phuc Vinh. We had, at the height of the Vietnam War, we had 13 EOD detachments. Now, today we have companies. Back then we had detachments. Detachment only had 10 people in it. And we only had 13 in country. And how we divided Vietnam up is in areas. So the 99th, we supported the northwest corner of 3 Corps up to the Cambodian border. So whoever operated in our area, we supported. So we supported, and this is, I went to Vietnam in February of 1970 and left in January of 71. And so we supported all of 1st Cav's operations in Vietnam out of Phuc Vinh. Phuc Vinh was the 1st Cav rear. And we supported part of the 1st Infantry Division, AO, when they were there, and they left during that time period. All of 11th ACR Armored Cavalry Regiment, and all of the 199th Light Infantry Brigade. So any unit that operated in this area, the 10 of us supported. Of the 10, only 9 of us were EOD. We had a clerk, 1 officer. and an E8. My E8 was Master Sergeant Mike Land. He has since passed away. But basically, Mike Land was my mentor. I went on a lot of missions in Vietnam with him, and I learned so much from him. One of the famous things that we did in Vietnam, well, May or June of 1970, we went into Cambodia during the incursion of May and June of 1970. President Nixon authorized us officially to go into Cambodia for 2 months, Americans, and it was part of the Vietnamization program where we're turning the war over to the South Vietnamese. So by going into the sanctuary zone, and we would give the South Vietnamese a good startup when they would as they would gradually take over. So we went in there and we destroyed a lot of enemy caches, weapons and ammunition cache. I was involved in the large destruction of the largest enemy weapons and ammunition cache in the Vietnam War. It was a place called Rock Island East, named for the Arsenal Rock Island there in Illinois. And Rock Island East was a above ground site. It was a jungle trail with different cache sites on it, and weapons and everything. There was over 320 some tons of weapons and ammunition at Rock Island East. So there was 8 of us that went in as EOD team. First Cav secured it, second of the 12th, and then we went in to set it up for destruction. And a lot of the weapons and different things were backhauled out of it. So we only destroyed 70 some tons, 70, maybe 78 tons of ammunition. We used 300 cases of C4. There's 40 pounds of C4 in a case. We used 12 cases of deck cord. There's three spools, 3,000 feet in the case. So we had 12 cases of deck cord because we had to reset all the explosives up on the different cache sites, and we had to run detonating cord lines, dual detonating cord lines to all the cache sites, and we had to bury the detonating cord lines because as we would withdraw from this area, we knew that the enemy was going to want to recapture it. So finally, on the day of that we were going to blow it up, there was a 2-ship HLZ helicopter. So the 2 helicopters came in, and on the ground was a squad from Echo Recon, the 2nd of the 12th, that was our security. And there was just Mike Land and myself. We had 10 priming systems of 15 minutes each. And so any one of the 10 systems could set this thing off. And if they came in and they saw one of our detonating cord leads and they cut our detonating, we still had a second one that was buried going to it. And then we set around the perimeter of the HLZ different explosive charges to go off at different times to keep the enemy out, because we knew that they were wanting to take this thing back. So here's the confusion. So we light the 10, 15-minute systems. Mike Land and I, go to the lead helicopter, and there's this infantry captain on the radio, and I don't know what's going on, but he hollers at us, cut the fuses, cut the fuses. So we run back out there with our crimpers and cutting time fuse, go back to the helicopter. Then now he wants us to light it. We don't have any more fuse igniters. We were using M60 fuse igniters. We don't have any more. So we got some C ration matches, went over and split the time fuse, used the head of the match. And, when you're real quick, you can light the second one off the first one. It spits back and you light the second. So we don't know what kind of time we have because we cut fuses. We're splitting, doing this. Now the perimeter charges now are going off that we had around the clearing, the HLZ. So those charges are detonating. Well, the helicopter people don't know anything about these scare charges. And you can watch those helicopters and they're just bouncing. They're wanting to get out of there. They think we'll probably get mortared. That's the only thing I can think of. So we like those things. We get in on the helicopter and then we can't lift off. We're overloaded and we just can't lift. The door gunner taps me on the shoulder and tells me that I have to get back, go to the helicopter in the back, and he dumps off a couple other infantry guys, and we're on the ground. So we're going back to and they dump off 2 people, and then the helicopters just take off, and there's just me and a couple infantry guys on the ground with this thing. The perimeter charges are going off. I'm going to go and cut fuses. That's what I'm going to do because I don't want to be here. And then another helicopter that was in orbit, empty, came down, picked us up, and we got out of there. And I had a camera. I took pictures of Rock Island East blowing up. We took ground to air fire, and it was beautiful. They could see our mushroom cloud 50 miles away. Back in Vietnam at Nui Ba Ra. Nui Ba Ra is the White Virgin Mountain. Fire support base buttons at the base of it at Song Bay. 50 miles away, they could see our mushroom cloud from the detonation. So that was Rock Island East. And that was the largest. And then I was involved in the 3rd largest, which was Warehouse Hill. Warehouse Hill was all underground. There's a ridge dug in on both sides of the ridge, and it had, they stored explosives and ammunition in warehouse. So that was all underground. And that was the 3rd largest. The city was the 2nd largest, but I wasn't at the city. So those are a couple of things that was involved in Vietnam.
So you made a couple of big holes in the ground. Needless to say, those craters must be huge.
A month later, I flew over that area, Rock Island East, and you could just see all the dead vegetation, long vegetation, and stuff like that. Yeah.
So I do got so going back to you joined at 17 with the intent to go to Vietnam. It took you 2 years to get there, 3 requests to go, and this is during the time when people are being drafted. And they're other guys back here in the States are burning their draft cards, running off to Canada so they don't go. And here you are at 17 being like, I will go forward with this. And I think there's a lot to be said about a person like that. So I actually just spoke with who was that? A woman the other day who was a Marine. She had joined in 1970. And I kind of had the same impression with her because, women were never drafted. And in 1970, her younger brother joined the Marine, or at 69, her brother joined the Marine Corps. And then in 70, she says, well, heck, I'm going to go too then. And as you know, there's something to be said about a person who is willing to, during that time, because by 1968, Vietnam had been actively going on for 3 years, right? Officially. And then you're just like, well, here I am. Let's go do these things. So that I think that says a lot to you about the kind of character you were, even at 17 years old. Now go ahead.
I was just going to say, 68, when I was in high school, it was, senior in high school, it was Tet Offense took place.
Mm-hmm.
You hear all the stuff on the news, you hear the protesters and all this other kind of stuff, but I wanted to go to Vietnam to see for myself what we were doing, what it was all about. All these other people hadn't been in country, set foot on the ground, protesting and stuff like that. And, to be honest with you, I think that the news didn't paint a very good picture of what was going on in Vietnam to the American public. And again, the government didn't do a very good job of explaining to the American public what was going on in Vietnam. The government did a poor job. Now, during the incursion, that was also what started the shoot, at Kent State. Remember the incident at Kent State where the protesters, they were protesting because we went into Vietnam. To American people, it appeared that we were escalating the war. And in fact, we were trying to de-escalate the war, you know. And, when we went into Cambodia and hit the sanctuaries, the city was, that was a medical place, that was classrooms, motor pool, ammunition storage at the city. When we went in there, I can tell you that probably 6 months, things were a lot quieter in Vietnam. We weren't getting rocketed as much, mortared. Things just cooled down for a period of time. But then gradually it started picking back up again. But for a period of time, we weren't getting rocketed all the time. And, and like, the Tet of 68, that, that was a desperate Hail Mary by North Vietnam. They were, after the Tet of 68, they were on the ropes. For example, the Viet Cong regiments that were in the South basically came out of hiding, and they were expecting the South Vietnamese that they would overthrow the government and join the revolution. That's what they were expecting. None of that happened. The Viet Cong regiments were destroyed, literally destroyed in 68. They didn't exist as they did before. Now, after 68, North Vietnamese soldiers moved down from the north and repopulated those Viet Cong regiments, but they were actually made of North Vietnamese soldiers. It just was, didn't do a very good job. And, we had news people embedded with us at Rock Island East. There was news people there reporting on Rock Island East. If you Google Rock Island East, you'll see a lot of stuff on Rock Island East. Shakey's Hill, there was news people at Shakey's Hill in Cambodia. But Warehouse Hill, there was no news crew at Warehouse Hill. Mm-hmm. If you Google Warehouse Hill, you will not find it anywhere on the history of Vietnam. I have the report, our report that we wrote up on the destruction of Warehouse Hill. But if there wasn't news people, you never heard about it.
Right.
And of course, during the Gulf War, we decided that embedding news people wasn't, going to be good for us. So we did not have, we kept news people out of the first Gulf War, and to keep operational security.
Right. So I was going to say, and you said like the media and the government did a pretty poor job at kind of detailing and explaining how things were going in Vietnam. I kind of feel like they did the same thing with Iraq and Afghanistan, except we had a little bit better welcome coming home, because I think, when I came home for R&R, the airport at DFW was lined with all these patriotic Americans, a lot of Vietnam veterans who were, giving us the welcome home that they should have received, that you guys should have received. Mm-hmm. And I think there was a large part of that. But still, like, the way things were portrayed on media, the way the government talked about things, I think it was both oversharing and then undersharing, because I mean, when you talk about OPSEC, operational security, I mean, there were a lot of details that are released out on the news, talking about, because he and I were both 1st Infantry Division in Germany, and it would be a big news thing on AFN or the regular news, the Big Red One set to deploy in early 2004, and like, why is that on the news? The whole brigade is X amount of people, blah blah blah. So I mean, on the one hand, I mean, it's hard for the conventional army to mobilize and deploy anywhere secretively. But on the other hand, like, give us a bit of a break and stop telling everybody what's going on. But that's I think that's always been kind of one of my things with media in general, is just how they share information, and the information they choose to share, and there's always someone out there trying to paint the military in a bad light. So
That's, yeah, they sensationalize certain things and stuff, like the My Lai massacre, for example, with the killing of innocent Vietnamese and stuff. That gets the press. All the bad stuff makes the press. Um, but yeah, it was yeah. Whether or not we should have been in Vietnam or not, my opinion was things went wrong following World War II. What happened in World War II, for example, was prior to that it was the French Indochina. During World War II, Japan invaded French Indochina for the resources, for for the rubber, for all the different resources that the Indochina, Southeast Asia offered the Japanese. And so the Viet Minh formed against against the Japanese. And we had OSS, and we had the British had SOE members in Vietnam, French Indochina during World War. Ho Chi Minh was a OSS agent uh, during Vietnam.
huh.
The Viet Minh wanted to kick out the Japanese. The Viet Minh wanted to uh, be independent, not to be a French colony. They wanted their own country and stuff like that. After World War II, we gave in to France, the US and Brit did, and back to being a French colony again. We should have gave them their independence. And that would have circumvented, probably changed the whole history of that, and it just went from there, Dien Bien Phu, and then we got involved in Vietnam, and different thing. But the way we left them high and dry, when we pulled out in 70, took all the combat troops out in 73, eventually the fall in 75, they, we did the same thing in Afghanistan.
I was just gonna say, it sounds
They
similar.
relied heavily on our support. They just they just couldn't do it on their own, and then we just dropped the funding and everything. Yeah, but for some reason, the soldier, we had the draft, and the soldier was the villain for the face of the Vietnam War. you know if you didn't like the war, that's, you need to vote. You need to vote. You need to run for office. You need to whatever. You know, we're just we're our country called, and we're it says they need us, and we went to, and we believed in our country and what we were doing, and you know, but if you don't like what we're doing, you need to vote.
Yeah. Same
100%
thing
agree.
that's going on now. I have to ask,
Yeah,
I definitely have to ask, you pushed so hard to go to Vietnam. What was it like to actually land in country finally? What was the feeling when you arrived? You're like, holy, I'm here now.
I
What's
could. It was unbelievable. When we flew into Tonson Air Force Base, we flew in on a Boeing Trans Caribbean Airlines 707. Uh, and we flew in, so a commercial airline. We're flying over Saigon, going into Tonson Air Force Base. and I look down, and it's at night, and I see all these lights. I'm expecting something like World War II, people blackout conditions and stuff like that.
Mm.
And there's all the lights down below. And then when we land, the first thing I did is you could smell Vietnam. First thing you do is you smell the country. Uh, and then we went to over there to the what was it, the replacement station, the 70th replacement station there and at Long Bend. And so we're going, this is in the middle of the night, and we're going to get into this like hangar like building, and we're getting our in-country initial indoctrination into Vietnam. And all of a sudden, there's this explosion. Kaboom. And then there's another explosion. We're all sitting here, don't know what in the world's going on. And then somebody yelled, incoming. And we were taking rockets, 107 rockets, millimeter rockets. And so then we had to go right down into a bunker. And we had only been in Vietnam maybe an hour or two, and already we're taking incoming rockets. And I'm like, wow. Yeah, it was a 90th replacement. That's where we went to.
What a welcome into Vietnam.
Yeah. But lights are on. It's just it was just strange.
Not what you expected at all.
No.
When we went to Iraq, so we had to go to Kuwait first for 3 weeks, and then we drove up from Kuwait into Samara, Iraq, and we were expecting IEDs or small arms, RPGs, anything along that convoy. I mean, it took us 3 or 4 days, but we were in Samara for probably, 2 or 3 weeks before anything actually happened. No mortars, no rockets. We were out in sector, and a tank ran over a landmine and blew track and some road wheel. And that was our like, I mean, that was a couple of weeks in. So at first we were like, wait a second, like, I thought there was a war going on, and turns out it's nice and quiet, and the people would wave at us, and the kids would wave at us, and some of them would give us the finger, but we thought that they didn't know what that meant, but
Passing out a bunch of MREs up here.
yeah, it's nice here. It's warm. It's nice. Yeah.
You got the finger. We would get this,
What is that?
Number 10 GI.
What's number 10 GI mean?
I don't think it's good.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But no, it is interesting though. So
number 1 is good. Number 10 is not good.
Right, for sure.
And
I remember talking to, when we came home, I spoke with my uncle who was in Vietnam in '68, and we were telling stories. He didn't really ever open up about it until not to me anyway, a little bit to my dad. But after I came back from Iraq, he talked to me a bit about his experiences over there, and we talked about my experience in Iraq, and he was telling me things to expect in regards to PTSD and the after effects of combat, and or sustained combat. And after all the joking and everything, or after all the storytelling and everything, he said to me, I sure am glad that I went where I went, not where you went. And I kind of looked at him crazy. I was like, how does that make sense? Like, we had body armor and technology and all this and that. And he's like, yeah, but I had beard and weed. It's like, what? I mean, I guess, if it's bad, numb it, and then it'd be fine. But no, it's definitely. Go ahead.
I think Vietnam veterans are, as you said, are opening up a lot more about their experience to the GWAT veterans, sharing. I think there's more sharing, because we can identify, a lot of similarities with what you guys went through. We saw that too. What did we really do? What was the game? Where it is now? Of course, Vietnam, once it fell and stuff like that, Vietnam's doing all right. We're buying, when we buy our tents, usually they're made in Vietnam, camping gear made in Vietnam, backpacks made in Vietnam, jackets, Vietnam's, still a communist country. They've kind of embraced capitalism to some scale. Um, but you know, I know a guy who he was born in Vietnam, and he was a refugee, and he goes back all the time. He's big with Coca-Cola. He was one of the head guys in Vietnam with Coca-Cola today, yeah, after the fall. Um, but it's, the people are really nice. Um, it came up, it worked out.
In the long run.
In the long run, it worked out.
I've often wondered if it's going to work out for where we went in Iraq and Afghanistan, because I mean, as it is now, I mean, you can go back to Vietnam and it's fine. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know, with how things are in the Middle East, I don't know if that's ever going to be a thing for us, because we did experience, I mean, all war aside, there were really nice people there who genuinely wanted to just live their lives in peace and be happy, and they were accepting of us there, even though, in their eyes, we were technically the invaders. And it's like you said, like, you can't help but be that grunt on the ground and wonder, like, am I doing any good here? Would this have happened if I wasn't here? So I mean, I think those are pretty standard thoughts, though, especially when you're just a small cog in the wheel.
Yeah. Vietnam was a beautiful country, and people were just, I love the food. Uh, and back then I drank beer, and I drank Vietnamese beer, Bom de Bom, 33 beer, uh, which has formaldehyde in it for preservative.
Mm.
Uh,
Just
but yeah, and Nuke Mom, fish sauce. I love fish sauce. Um, but yeah, you don't. Right now in Afghanistan, you've got, of course, the Taliban's in ruling, but you've got the Afghan ISIS group, and those two are killing each other. I believe that it might take a while. Things will be stabilized. It's got to be. It can't be that chaotic forever. You
You would
know,
think. Yeah, you would think.
yeah, and it's just it's a shame that you know people, just extremism is just of any sort, whether right, left, or what. Extremism is just no good. Uh,
Kevin, I
and
don't know about going back to revisit Iraq in 2035 for a reunion for 126. I
you
got past.
you would like to?
No, I'll take that one.
No,
I'll
you
take
pass.
yeah, yeah.
I would
I
go.
would go.
I would go
I'd
for
go to
sure.
Vietnam.
Yeah, you would. Have you ever been back since then?
No, and I would go. And I have this friend, like I just told you, he said if I ever want to go back, he goes back all the time, and he'd be a great guide. He's speaks the language, and he really knows it. He's helping us out on Sante, for example. There's a friend of mine's writing a new book for Osprey Press on the Sante raid, and there's still questions about on the Sante raid. Uh, some things that don't make any sense. One of them is that there was a schoolhouse nearby, and they supposedly 300, whether they be Russian or Chinese, assaulted the Sante Raiders. I do know how well you know anything about the Sante raid. Now in Delta, we had two members of Delta were Sante Raiders when I went to Delta, and that was Dick Meadows, who is pretty famous, and Dick Meadows was involved in the American hostage rescue in Iran. He was leading the team that went in to prepare Tehran for our reception, with the vehicles and the hide site and everything. So Dick Meadows. The other guy was Sergeant Major Jack Joplin, who was our unit medic. And these were two Sante Raiders. And the reason Delta was created was because of Sante. It took a while for us to the Sante Raiders to get put together, to train up, and to put a whole thing into operation to launch the Sante mission. Our first unclassified mission in Delta was POW rescue. To have a stand-up force that could go wherever Americans were held hostage, POW or whatever, to have a stand-up force that could deploy within hours to rescue the Americans. And that was, Sante was part of the emphasis for Delta. Also, of course, the hijackings that were taking place in the 1970s, aircraft hijackings. But Sante, you know, these 300 people from the schoolhouse that assaulted the Sante Raiders, it's like you read that they were either Russian or Chinese. Now, what were they, Russian or Chinese? You can tell the difference between Russian and Chinese. And if you're on the ground and you're, you know, there's bodies and stuff like that, you're going to take intelligence stuff off the bodies and stuff. So he's trying to determine whether this was a mixed group. Were they all Russian, 300, or were they all, Chinese? The other thing is, why wasn't the POWs there at the Sante? You know, they had been moved. Why did they get moved? Well, if you read one thing, why they got moved is because of the monsoons. The prison was flooded from the monsoons. Monsoons happen every year. And this friend of mine believes he knows the answers to all these questions, and we're going to be looking into it, and he's going to be looking into it more. But there was, and one was that maybe there was a leak. Well, the Russians had radar and were giving information to the North Vietnamese about American reconnaissance flights. So there was an uptick before the raid. There was an uptick of SR-71s and U-2 flights over the Sante area. The Russians were telling the North Vietnamese, hey, there's more increased surveillance traffic going on here. Well, I just learned this. 10 kilometers from Sante, the North Vietnamese were digging a underground bunker complex for the Politburo, Ho Chi Minh, and all of those. So they were making this. The Russians were the contractors for this bunker, and it was called K9, the K9 complex. And so what they were worried about is the surveillance aircraft that are going over the prison might accidentally pick up the construction of the secret underground command and control bunker that they were digging. So they moved, this is their latest thing, they moved the prisoners to keep this project secret. Ho Chi Minh died in K9 complex. That's where he passed away. So there's a lot, there's a lot yet to be learned from history. And the thing is, now with the way we are with the North Vietnamese or the Vietnamese in general, we could, find more about what they were doing, how they were viewing, the Vietnamese were viewing this whole thing. And so I think it's going to be pretty good.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of answers that that need to be answered. A lot of questions. Yeah, that's
when you think you know everything, you find out you really don't know everything.
Right. And that's kind of how that tends to go. What's up, Tyree?
You are a part of several events in history. Several events. Like the majority of the events at a certain time period. What is it like to be able to reflect on something like that? Like personally, I love history and I can read about Roman times and how, Caesar did this and, they did this, but I can read about things that you've done but you can read about things you've done. Is it always accurate?
Uh, I would say pretty much accurate. Um, things that maybe the spin, like let's say we talk about Grenada. Was Grenada considered a success or was it considered a failure? It's depending on how you look at Grenada. Uh, the perception was Grenada that was given to the people. Grenada was a complete success. We rescued the medical students. Uh, well, first of all, I'll go back to the Iran hostage rescue mission and the Holloway Commission to investigate the failures of the Iran hostage rescue mission. Out of the Holloway Commission, they they just said that there should be a joint task force set up to plan these kind of missions where it involves the Air Force, the Navy, and all the joint services stuff. So Joint Special Operations Command was set up, JSOC was set up at following the Iran hostage rescue mission. So we would not have a repeat it, more interoperability, communications with each other, improve all that stuff. Well, out of Grenada, Operation Urgent Fury, US SOCOM was established because of the failures that took place on the ground in Grenada that maybe the public is not all aware of. First of all, the medical students were never in harm's way in Grenada. They were not under house arrest, nothing. The medical students, the American medical students and the medical university in Grenada, this is a cash cow. This is money. And they would not have done anything to disrupt that. The medical students were fine. What happened is they had a coup. In comes a Marxist government supported by Cuba, and Cuba was then going to the Salinas airfield. They were improving the airfield there at the Salinas airfield, and they were setting up hangars that could house MiG aircraft. So our mission, Delta's mission, B Squadron's mission, the mission I was on, was Richmond Hill Prison. Our mission was to rescue the political prisoners that were held in prison to reestablish a democratic elected government. If the medical students were in any danger or harm, then our primary mission would have been to rescue the medical students. That was a follow-on thing with the Rangers did that. And even when they rescued a bunch of medical students, they found out they didn't have them all. They were different places and stuff like that. So our job was to go in there and to rescue the political prisoners at Richmond Hill Prison. So we were supposed to fly in over at first light. Now, this is the first operation with Black Hawk, combat operation with Black Hawk helicopters. And we had, I guess there was 10 helicopters in this formation. So Delta was in 6 helicopters. I was in helicopter 5. And helicopter 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 were 2 SEAL helicopters, SEAL Team 6 helicopters. Their mission was the radio station, Grenada radio station, to capture that so that they could not communicate with the people, and then we would own the radio station. And then the British Governor General's residence. His name was Scoones, and he was basically under house arrest in his residence, and that was to rescue British Governor General. So we were supposed to go in before first light. I'll see if I can stabilize this. We're supposed to go in before first light, and we were delayed. The reason I think we were delayed is because of the Marines were landing. The Marines were landing, doing an amphibious assault to recapture the Pearl airfield. The Marines do not do nighttime amphibious assaults. So they didn't want us, if we went in before first light, just before first light, then we figured we would spoil the surprise for the Marine landing amphibious assault. So we were delayed going in. So when we went in, we had, and well, I'm trying to get this. So as we went in, there was another ridge that overlooked Richmond Hill Prison, and that was Fort Frederick. The Cubans had set up anti-aircraft guns on Fort Frederick. They had 20 ZSU 23s. They had 12.51 cal, 12.7s. They had all this in a ridge that overlooked the prison. So when we flew in, our 6 helicopters flew into the prison, and my helicopter, we were going to land fast rope. This is the first time that we were using fast ropes in combat. We were going to fast rope outside the prison, and there was a guard barracks, and we were going to go and contain the guard barracks so that they would not reinforce the prison. And then other people were going to land in the prison. But when we went in, we just took fire. I mean, the fire was intense. 23 millimeter, 12.7, 7.62. Not only they were shooting at us from up on the ridge, up on that Fort Frederick, they were shooting at us from below. Bullets were going through the helicopters and the floor of the helicopters. The door gunner got immediately shot. This was Task Force 160th, the 160th Special Operation Aviation Regiment. And it's the first joint use of them with us in combat. And so it was just intense. And then we pulled off. Now, helicopter 4 in front of me was shot down. The pilot was mortally wounded, and they crashed. Then we circled back around, did a big circle, and we went in for the second time. And again, it was intense. The fire was really intense. And then we pulled off.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I remember I listened to a different show where you compared that to something from the Crimean War.
Yeah, the charge of the Light Brigade.
Yeah.
The 11th Lancers of the charge in Crimea during 1853 when they charged the Russian and Turkish gun positions. They had guns in front of them. There was 2 hilltops. They had guns up, and they got the orders. The Lancers, the 11th Lancers, their orders got mixed up. I guess they were supposed to do a flanking maneuver, but anyway, they charged right through the Turkish and Russian thing. And it was just, if you read about the charge of the Light Brigade, they just went in and they charged right through the gun positions. And then after they charged them, they turned around and they went back through the gun positions. I mean, there was a French off general, I believe, that was with the Brits as an observer. And his comment was, he said, that was magnificent, but that's not warfare. That's the quote from the French general. And we went through the second time. We had no AC-130 gun support. We had no jets, fast movers and stuff. And later on, I talked to the guy with a crew member of the AC-130 that was supposed to be, and they were actually on orbit when we were supposed to be there. And so they were orbiting, and then they had to pull off to get refueled. And that's why we had no AC-130 gun support. We had no.
That is ridiculous.
Well, that is ridiculous. Because they delayed us for supposedly for the Marines. Now, the other thing is, we were over the water and we were listening to the Grenadian radio station, and we were still over the water. And they said the invasion of Grenada has begun. So, citizens, grab your rifles, go to the beaches, and meet the Americans on the beach. They knew we were coming. So when we got over the beach area, people were down there on the beach waving and everything. And you could hear pop, pop, somebody was shooting. But I have been told unofficially that it was intentionally leaked that we were invading Grenada by the State Department of State or somebody to the Cuban embassy in Mexico, that the Cubans on the island, when we invaded, the Cubans should not resist the invasion. Now, I don't know who, the Cubans that were on Grenada, of course, were, quote, engineers, but you can compare them to combat engineers. They had previously served in Angola. So these were veteran warfighters, but they were engineers too, combat engineers. They knew how to man ZSU 23s and shoot ZSU 23s. I've always wanted to confirm this, but this is something I was told, and I believe it might be true. So when we landed in Grenada, our 5 aircraft now, only one of them was flyable. So my team and another team got on the aircraft. We went to the crash site, secured the crash site with our comrades that were injured and stuff like that. And the medevac helicopter came off one of the ships off coast and medevaced our guys to the ship. We had 17 of our guys were wounded. We had no fatalities. And one of the reasons we had no fatalities is because they got immediate care from the Navy ships that were off the coast. I know, someone was shot in the stomach, like Jerry Boykin, who later became Lieutenant General Boykin. But he was, I believe, a captain at this time. He had a SATCOM radio strapped to his back, and he took a 23 millimeter round in the SATCOM radio, and he lost a little bit of his shoulder muscle tissue, but took a 23 millimeter round.
I would imagine that feels like, I don't know, a bulldozer slamming into your back at full speed.
Yeah,
like, that's got to feel insane.
Yeah.
While you're doing everything else you're doing.
And so we were going to do a ground assault. Now we don't have any helicopter, and Rangers are jumping in. I actually took 2 pictures of the Rangers jumping in to Point Salinas. I think I'm the only one that took pictures. I have the only one in Delta that had a camera with me. And I only one took, so I have pictures of the Rangers jumping in.
All this stuff going on, all this fire, everything, chaos, and you're out there taking pictures. And if that doesn't really kind of detail the kind of person that it takes to be in Delta, I mean, the level of calm that you have to sustain during some stuff like that to be, you said you took, there was some photography lessons in the OTC, but I mean, still, just to be like, you know what, there's Rangers falling from the sky right now. I'm gonna take a picture.
Yeah, one of my ammo pouches, I always kept a camera in one of my ammo pouches. So I took pictures of group pictures there. If you've seen some of that on the internet, I took those. And yeah, so we're going to do a ground assault on the prison, but then we were informed that after we left, they opened up the prison and let everybody out. So that was Grenada. But out of Grenada, US SOCOM was formed. Again, there was problems communicating with all the different groups and stuff, like the gunship not being on station when we were on station. Communicating, the SEALs were having problems communicating. I think they left a SATCOM radio when at the Governor General's house. They left their SATCOM radio, on the aircraft. And so then they were using a phone, regular phone, to communicate to everybody else. And we maps. We had tourist maps of Grenada. We didn't have there wasn't it had we didn't have regular maps. And then there was, on one set of maps, there was a grid pattern. So you would be able to call if you needed to call in fire support and stuff like that. Come to find out that there was two separate editions of this grid map, which were different. And so that could have been some of the confusion with a lot of friendly fire casualties that took place. There was, we had a high, there was a, for a small operation, Grenada was, we had a lot of friendly fire casualties. There was a hospital that of Grenadians, I guess, mental disability hospital, that was accidentally bombed. Uh, things like that. But anyway, the thing is, we keep learning, and USOCOM became what it is today out of Grenada. And then, of course, we had, after Grenada, we had Desert Storm. There's pictures out there of Desert Storm during the Gulf War and Desert Storm that claims that I was one of the security people for Schwarzkopf.
About that.
I don't, and I'm trying to get that corrected, but when things go out on the internet, that's the way it is. That was actually a friend of mine that kind of looked, Bill Cronin, he dark hair, he wears glasses. He was Delta. So we did, some of our guys, we had 4 guys that were part of Schwarzkopf's security detail, but I was not one of them. There's even this book just came out not too, called Warfighter, by Colonel Jesse Johnson. He was a member of the unit, but in there he says that I was Schwarzkopf's security detail. So he claims that I was, he said I was EOD and all this other stuff. What he said is true, but I was not part of Schwarzkopf's security detail. I was involved in another project during the Gulf War, and that was the destruction of the command and control facility known as Taji Number 2. Taji Number 2 was the big Iraqi command control facility. It was a cut and cover facility. They dug a big, huge hole in the ground. They built a 2-story structure, and then they covered it back up with dirt. Then they put a concrete bomb burster slab on top of the structure and covered that up with dirt. And that was Taji Number 2. Now, during Desert Storm, the Air Force attempted to destroy the Taji Number 2 by dropped 60 Blue 109s onto this facility and didn't do no damage to the facility. Now, the Blue 109s are a 2,000-pound bomb, but they're a special bomb. These were our so-called bunker buster bombs, and they were made of hardened steel. And this was what we would take out. But in reality, Taji Number 2 probably would have been a tactical nuclear target, such as a B-61 bomb. So the Air Force developed the B-61 nuclear bombs to take out such hardened underground structures. But we're not going to use a B-61. And so the Air Force never developed, other than the Blue 109s, a bunker buster bomb. So our job was to take the bunker out and to go in, breach the doors, and then it'd be a Ranger assault. There's going to be a Ranger battalion assault on the thing. Myself and another Delta breacher would work with the Rangers, and he would breach one bomb blast door, I'd breach another one, Once we breached the doors, we let the Rangers take over, assault the bunker, and then we would bring in explosives and blow the facility up. So I had to brief General Steiner, General Carl Steiner, U.S. SOCOM commander, on the plan to take out Taji number 2. So I started my briefing out to General Steiner. I says, we roll back time. Today is now 1945. 1945, we could take that bunker out, 1945. But here, 1991, we cannot take the bunker out with conventional munitions. It's because everything went nuclear instead of conventional. I says, in 1945, we had several options. You know, we had the 2 British bombs, the 12,000-pound tall boy, 22,000-pound Grand Slam bombs. Those were both during World War II dropped by the British Lancaster bombs. But these 2 bombs, the tall boy and the Grand Slam, were actually manufactured and forged here in the United States. Britain didn't have the facilities to make these large 12,000, 22,000 bombs. So we made them here, the bomb casings. They were sent to England by ship. Then they were filled up, and then they were dropped on submarine pens, aqueducts, dams, different other hardened structures. Like, you know, the Grand Slam bomb, the 22,000 bomb, took out a submarine pen, went through 10 meters of reinforced concrete, 10 meters of reinforced concrete, and took out a submarine pen. And then also at the end of the war, we developed the T-12 bomb, the Super Cloudbuster bomb, which was a 43,000-pound bomb. And that was to be dropped by a B-36. We did drop some of these, a modified B-29 before the B-36 came out. We test dropped some of these by B-29. And so it was a 43,000-pound bomb. There are 3 of them still in existence. One of them is at the Armament Museum at Eglin Air Force Base. It's in front of the museum, laying on the ground. One of them at that time was at the Aberdeen Proving Grounds in the middle of a traffic circle, standing on its end. And now that bomb is at Fort Lee. And the 3rd bomb is at Pueblo Chemical Army Depot here in Colorado. So there's 3 bomb casings, 3 T-12 bomb casings. I says we could take a couple of those from the museum, fill them up with explosives, and drop them. So that's how I started my briefing to General Stein. And then I briefed him the whole plan. But on the last day of the war, Taji number 2 was actually disabled. It wasn't completely destroyed, but it was disabled. What happened was there was an officer in upstate New York at some depot in New York where they have all these 8-inch gun barrels. And this officer was looking at these gun barrels, these 8-inch gun barrels just lying around, and said, boy, they would make a good bomb. You know, all you have to do is, you know, put some fins on it, put a guidance system on it, and we could turn one of these 8-inch gun barrels into a bomb. And that's exactly what happened. And the bomb was called a GBU-28B. It was a guided bomb unit 28B. The reason it was called the GBU-28 is because it took 28 days to make a bomb, which is unheard of to develop this bomb. So we dropped one in Eglin, test dropped one at Eglin, Florida. Then we had 2 of GBU-28s. Now GBU-28 is 4,700 pounds. So we put one of these on each wing of an F-111, and then we put a couple regular 2,000-pound bombs on the other wing, and they flew from England to Iraq. And then the first plane dropped its first GBU-28, and it missed the target. Second plane came around, and it went in top dead center and penetrated the bunker and blew up. I later talked to a Marine lieutenant colonel intelligence officer who went into Taji number 2, and we believed it probably totally destroyed it, and it wasn't completely totally destroyed. But now we have the MOP bomb. I don't know if you are familiar with the MOP. The MOP is the massive ordnance penetrator bomb. So it's big. I think it's a GBU. I'm not. This is out of the top of my head. GBU 57 MOP. But we have not used one of these in combat yet. But we do have a big, huge penetrator bomb. The GBU 28B got the nickname as Sodomizer. That's the nickname for GBU 28. So that was what I was involved in. And then once on the last day of the war, Taji number 2 was taken out by GBU 28. So then I went in to support our operations in, going into Iraq, doing the Scud hunting missions. The Brits were doing Scud hunting, and we were doing Scud hunting missions. So, and I have another fact that will surprise a bunch of people, and there'll be a book coming out on this too. No Scud missiles or missile launchers were destroyed by coalition forces during the Gulf War. Contrary to what you read here, my unit, though, claimed the destruction of a GBU, claimed the destruction of a Scud missile and missile launcher. It was actually a Roland missile. I talked to a guy who was involved in going into Iraq following the Gulf War as part of the inspection team to the destruction of all WMDs in Iraq, and his job was to count for all Scud missiles and missile launchers in Iraq to ensure that they are all destroyed. And so his job was to account for everything. And in accounting for everything, the coalition forces. So we, that one that we claimed that was a Scud was a Roland. Another one was actually a Scud decoy that was destroyed. And so that's it. We didn't destroy, but we hampered by our hunting teams in there, hampered the ability for them to successfully carry out launching, because they had to hide their launchers and stuff because we were trying to seek out and find them. So we acted as a deterrent. So, and that part was success. So that's.
I remember hearing about all that stuff when I was young. Like when this all happened, I was 9, but I still paid attention. So anytime I heard about Scud, anything, I'm like, oh my God, it's so terrifying. And you were there, dealing with them.
This guy who's the same Marine that I was talking about that inspected the Taji number 2 is the same person that's going to be writing this book out. It's not out yet. I've reviewed some of his chapters to make sure that for accuracy, and so it's going to be good book. So, and I do get a lot of author requests. I get like documentaries, like the Sante one. There's going to be a new. I mentioned that there's going to be a new documentary on Sante. It's called 27 Minutes at Sante. It's still in the works yet. So, and then this book on Sante from Osprey Press. So I do get contacted by different authors and people, and I have a lot of contacts in the special operations community, so I can connect people to the right people.
I wanted to say, so a career spanning 3 decades from Vietnam to 1999, you've covered a lot of ground and did a whole ton of stuff. So in the early Delta years, right, from its founding in late 77, early 78, and the first operation in 1980 with the Operation Eagle Claw, which we haven't talked about yet. going into Operation Urgent Fury, Uphold Democracy, the Atlanta prison
Operate,
riots,
yeah, yeah. Operation Pocket Planner, the Atlanta prison takeover.
right? And then going into the Gulf War, Mogadishu, and any other like other operations that may have happened or whatever. So those are the main ones that the general public probably knows about. And so when you, I've like I said before in one of the emails we exchanged, I've listened to quite a bit of different shows that you've been on, and one thing that there was one show, the way he asked the question, I was actually kind of really upset with, right? Because he made it seem as though every early mission that Delta was a part of was this like massive failure. And that to me, that is like that didn't make sense to me, right? Because for one reason, Delta Force was in its founding, right? And everyone there's a learning curve with everything. And and I'm sure, not all of the details you really go into. So there's probably other things that happen that you really don't talk too much about. But even if a mission sets off and it's the first of its kind, and you get the boots on ground, and it starts to kick off, but then all the problems start to arise, and then you come back afterwards and you have the AAR and you figure out your improves and your sustains, and you're like, okay, we need better air assets. Okay, so now let's create the 160th. We need better
Mhm.
communication amongst all the units operating. Okay, let's set up JSOC and US SOCOM.
Yeah,
Um,
the JCU, Joint Communications Unit.
Right. And so in doing all these early missions where, okay, like you kind of mentioned talking about Grenada, is it a success or is it a failure? Well, the college students were not in any harm, as you said. The political prisoners were released, so I'm sure y'all weren't able to snatch those guys up like you wanted to. Um, 17 wounded, helicopter goes down. So it sounds like when you read about it at face value, oh, it was a big failure. We didn't get anything done. The SEALs are supposed to control the radios. Radio word got out anyway. But you guys like the whole operation, and you have Marines, Navy, Army all working together in one massive operation, and it hasn't really been done before. So obviously there's going to be complications. Obviously there's
Yeah.
going to be problems, and you guys were able to solve it and create, the special operations community and the joint service operations community that we have today. Like you were like literally the guinea pig for all of this stuff.
Well, special operation units that are created during wartime are usually dismantled upon the ending of that war. In the past, it's always been that way. And after Vietnam ended, the first thing that Congress would do is to reduce the funding that goes to the Department of Defense and everything. And one of the things they get rid of is special operations. And that happened after Vietnam, for example. It's happened. If you look in history in all the other wars, specialized units are everything goes back to conventional again. The ships and the tanks and the artillery and uh, now, but so basically with the budget cuts and just downsizing of the military after Vietnam, special operations took a big hit, you know. Um, but there was a lot of good stuff. Some of the missions I did a lot of security evaluations. Uh, and I went to Sudan first after I got to the unit. We were invited by the vice president of Sudan, who came to the United States, wanted a security assessment, the president of Sudan. So I was part of a team. There's two of us from Delta that went into a part of a team that went to Sudan to evaluate the security of the president of Sudan. And then I looked at the setting up a VIP EOD unit in the Sudanese army. They were British trained EOD folks, Sudanese EOD folks, setting up a VIP unit to support the president of Sudan for searches and stuff like that. And so I worked with them. I went on at the time in Sudan, and this is in the early 1980, 81. At the time in Sudan, there was they had a lot of terrorist bombing in Sudan. It was from a Chad group that was setting bombs off, and they were quite sophisticated bombs that they were setting off. They were using electronic timers, using IC, 555 timers, IC chip type integrated circuit timers. And I went on some things with them. We went intercepted 2 suitcases full, and they went into this little room, and they went click click, and they opened these 2 suitcases up, and they were full of Semtex H explosives. And I'm looking at that. I'm telling them, I says, you do very many of these interceptions like this, and the next time you go click click and open that suitcase up, it's going to go. So I then later went in and trained the Sudanese how to, brought in X-ray equipment, trained them how to do that. And then once they knew my background, they had me going to all the different ammunition depots that they had there. They made their own 9mm, 12mm shotgun ammunition. I looked at their plant and their storage and made security recommendations and stuff like that. And so President of Sudan. Then I later went into Saudi Arabia in probably in 1984, before the Gulf War. And I were part of a team that evaluated the security of His Royal Highness Prince Abdullah, who later became the king. But at the time, he was the prince, and he was the commander-in-chief of Saudi Arabia National Guard, the SANG. So I looked at we evaluated his security motorcade. He had like 5 mansions that he lived in. I looked at 3 of them. I didn't look at the one at Mecca and Medina because you have to be a Muslim. Mm-hmm. But I looked at his other stuff. And so I made up a table of organization using dogs and everything to set up a VIP security for him. So I did a lot of the security assessments, did a lot of valuations, like Korea and Ecuador. I did a hijacking. What year was that hijacking? In Honduras, there was a Honduran aircraft that was hijacked with Americans on board. I think 14 Americans.
1982.
And, huh?
In 1982.
Yeah, it was 1982. So I went down there and was on the advance party. Now that's in Eric Haney's book, but that part of his book is totally wrong. And I wrote Eric and told him. Eric didn't come down there until later. I was on the advance party, so he had a lot of things wrong in his book on that. And I wrote him after the book came out. But Eric and I were on the same team during Iran hostage rescue mission. We were on the same 4-man team.
Yeah, I'd heard that that there were some discrepancies in his book, and there was controversy around that. I wasn't, I mean, I don't know right from wrong, but it is still interesting to read some of these stories because I'm sure things are still kind of somewhat based in truth. And then, but that's neither here nor there. That's for you guys in the unit to deal with.
Well, the best part of Eric's book, and I tell it people that his description of selection assessment, he's got one of the best descriptions of selection and assessment. He describes it pretty well for that time period when we were doing it in Uwari. Now, after 1978, starting in 1979, we moved to West Virginia. So currently today, selection assessment is done in West Virginia.
No, I didn't actually know that. I thought for some reason I was thinking that there was just the one SFAS, and that was kind of well, I mean, I get so I in 9, I got mobilized to Fort Sill to do drill sergeant duties. And before we were able to go on the trail and do our jobs, we had to take this course, CAT C, combined arm training course, I believe it's called, and it was instructed by 3 former Delta guys. Never got their last names. Main guy's name was Chris. One of them was a sniper. All super nice dudes, and very, very knowledgeable. And we, and me being a former infantry guy, just was a sponge the entire time we were there. So it was a week-long course, and it was basically what had started this whole thing with them is that the Army started to look at like how we were training troops, and can we make it better? And so they looked to you guys and they said, you guys have been doing amazing things with how you train troops. Can you take a look at our training doctrine and see what's wrong with it? And so these 3 men, they were looking at it like, why are you still teaching things, in A, B, C order, when if C is the issue, go straight to C. And so the way they were teaching that to us is through rifle marksmanship. And so we were doing barrier shoots and walk back and shoots every 50 meters while standing. From the low ready, pop down to the prone and hit your target from 300 meters. Things that we had, the conventional force we didn't do, right? It just wasn't a thing.
Well, of course, Beckwith spent time with the 22 SAS, the British SAS. And so our selection and assessment course is based on the British 22 SAS course that's done in Beacon Hills in Wales. So we copied the British SAS. We brought British SAS instructors in to the first in OTC1 to teach us shooting. So we were taught we taught from the British SAS, and we copied a lot of our stuff from the British. And we have the best and closest relationship with the British. I did a lot of work with the British SAS. I even spent time with the New Zealand SAS. The British SAS, I did a lot of climbing with them because climbing is my passion, and I did that on the side. I rock climbed and mountain climbed, and I taught climbing in the unit and guided mountain rock climbing trips and guided mountain climbing trips. So I climbed Denali in Alaska the first time in 1990 with 9 members of the British SAS. I was the only American, but they invited me to climb Denali with them. All 10 of us made it to the top at the same time on Denali, had a great time. I did a lot of stuff with British SAS. So we copied them, and I got to give credit where credit's due. And of course, some of the shooting you're talking about, we do what called man versus man, where you've got your steel targets and stuff like that, and you're shooting against another person, and that's how you can improve. And you're doing reload drills, only putting 2 rounds or unknown rounds. If somebody puts a couple rounds in your rifle or whatever, then you've got to do reloads, and you have malfunction, and then the instructor calls malfunction, and you got to clear your malfunction, and doing that kind of stuff. One of the things that was taught was instinctive shooting instinctively versus using sights, especially close quarter combat. Our first assault rifles were M3 grease guns. Okay. I don't know if you know the Tanker M3 grease gun. It's an open bolt thing. It looks just like the old-fashioned grease gun. And so that was our first assault weapons, and it took 45 ammunition, the same. So Beckwith believed to carry the same kind of ammo, so we carry 2 45s, and they're match 45, so real good 45s, and they're tuned up, and we could fix the 45s the way we liked them. We had our own armors and stuff like that. So he had all of our sights taken off the M3 grease gun, so that we would shoot instinctive. And then the other thing we would shoot is 3x5 inch index cards.
What?
So we would have to, and we would double tap, put 2 rounds, and you can do it. It's so, the rate of fire for M3 grease gun is really slow. So you can actually do a trigger pull and get 2 rounds, 2 rounds, 2 rounds just with your trigger pull once you learn the rate of fire for your M3. And shoot 3x5s. Beckwith must have had something against 3x5 cards because we were shooting 3x5 cards. Let's see some of the other stuff that he had us doing. Well, we were playing football too. We would go out and he was a big college football player. He was going to go to the NFL, but he went into the military. So he thought he had a football team too. So we would go out and do football things and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was really upset to find that he was a Georgia Bulldog. I'm from
Yeah.
Arkansas, so I'm obviously the Razorbacks, and just tired of hearing about Georgia. But take what you
we
can get.
would, and we do brick PT. We we'd have do brick PT. We had these bricks, these solid bricks, and we would do everything, jumping jacks, and holding the arms out to build up our arm strength. And brick PT. This is some of the crazy stuff that we did. It was an interesting time, and of course, we were in the old stockade. There was like 4 or 5 prisoners in the stockade, and they just took them out and sent them to the county jail there in Cumberland County, and we paid them to house these prisoners, and then we took over the jail. We cut the jail cell bars and stuff like that, and I cut some of the jail cell bars, and I used them for a stake for playing horseshoes. But yeah, we converted that into our facility until we built the new compound there out on Range 19.
Well, I have we I don't want to keep you all night long, and we've been going over for about 3 hours, or close to, I guess, 2.5 hours. And I would absolutely let this go all night long, because I'm really enjoying hearing all these stories. And but I have one question, actually 2 questions. One, would you be interested in doing another episode with us
Sure.
in the future? Because I feel like, you are a wealth of knowledge, and you clearly have like a history mind on top of a military mind. And I saw your perspective on a lot of things that we're talking about, like definitely new perspectives that I've not heard before. So I'm really enjoying all of that. But my other question to you is, so coming in the Army in 1968, and then serving as an EOD tech escort, and then coming into the unit and standing up the EOD side of that, standing up Delta Force, doing all of these early operations, seeing the progression of not only Delta Force, but special operations community as a whole, and then the conventional forces as a whole, retiring in 99, and here we are in 2023. When you look at like the direction of the military and how well things are going, or how things are going, I guess maybe is my perspective, but how is one, like, how is combat changed? How has war changed? And how has the soldier changed?
Well, I don't think the soldiers changed, but combat has changed. In Vietnam, I wore jungle fatigues. Uh, I wore a bush hat. I didn't wear, only one time in Vietnam did I wear a helmet and a flak jacket. We had flak jackets back then. And that was when we had a helicopter that crashed in the POL point, the refuel point for helicopters. So it went down. It was part of a paint team. It was loaded with ammunition, WP, and it crashed there. We had to clear that site of the exploding ordnance and everything. And so that other helicopters can come in there to refuel. And in that time, we donned helmets and wore flak jackets. And other than that, I I never wore a bomb suit in my career. Never put one on. Never operated a robot or had a robot. Uh, Today now, and I'm following the technology today, and I'm very involved in what's going on in Ukraine as far as ordnance goes. I have a group of us that are what I call subject matter experts on ordnance. There's a group called Bomb Technicians Without Borders, just like there's a group Doctors Without Borders. And I am in contact with those people. If they have any questions and I can help them on ordnance, and that with my contacts and stuff. And if I hear anything, I send it to the Bomb Technicians Without Borders. They're helping the Ukrainians. But some of the stuff there that they're using in Ukraine is just amazing. The Russians are using the use of drones and stuff like that's changing warfare. Um, the Russians have got these mines that they're aerial drop cluster mines that land, and depending on if they land in soft ground or hard ground, how they fix, whether they soft ground, the spike comes out to help stabilize them. These are anti-personnel mines, and they're seismic mines, and they can tell the difference between an animal walking and a human walking, and they can check the seismic footprint of a human. And when the footprint starts to dissipate, the seismic imprint, then this fires up and then sets off the munition. And they got these same thing with the tank things, that anti-tank mines that can detect the difference between wheel vehicle, tracked vehicles. You know, the technology and what's going on in Ukraine is a step up with the technology that you saw in Afghanistan and Iraq, and it's going to be different. The future of warfare is going to be changing tremendously. Change from my Vietnam time to the GWAT time. The next one will be changing too.
Yeah. So I have one question before we close out. Pretty simple. Crazy life. You've had a crazy life. What is life for you now?
I do research, history research. I For the EOD Warrior Foundation, if they have somebody contacts them with a historical EOD question, book author, documentary, I do historical EOD research for the EOD Warrior Foundation. Since 2015, we've added names to the EOD Memorial from World War II and Korea based on research that I've been doing, finding people that we have missed in our EOD Memorial. I'm the assistant historian for the National EOD Association. For the National EOD Association, I'm on 4 different committees, chairing 2 of the committees. I'm in contact with still whole special operations people. If somebody passes away, I put out the email to the group saying somebody's passed away. Same thing with the EOD folks. I keep people track of anything that's, jobs, for example, EOD jobs. I get notices and then I put it out to the guys that are looking for jobs. So I stay busy, but doing EOD type research, history research, weapons, history of weapons, different weapon systems. That's how I spend my time. Plus, just traveling. We travel half the year. We're going to the Arctic this summer, the Canadian Arctic in Greenland. We were in Greenland in 2000. We'll be back in Greenland this summer. I've been to Antarctica 3 times, South Georgia, Falklands, the Galapagos, the Amazon, Africa, Asia. Went to Komodo Island to see Komodo dragons, spent time in Australia. So we travel my wife's a professional wildlife photographer and retired freelance photojournalist. So that's what my wife does. She's written 13. My wife has written 13 books. She published different travel articles for different publications, newspapers in the past. She's now retired on that, but she still does wildlife photography. Last summer, we were photographing walruses in Alaska, a bachelor group of walruses in Alaska.
I feel like
So
you
we
guys
still,
are. I'm sorry. I feel like you guys are like in competition with each other. Like who can do all of these crazy things. Like that is, you have been all over this planet. Like, is there
yeah,
not like, have you been to Arkansas?
yeah. I've climbed the highest points in all 50 states, except for missing 2 states. I've been to the highest point in Arkansas. And trying to think of that Mount Magazine, right?
Yep.
Mount
Yep.
Magazine.
Yep.
Yep, been there. I haven't been to Bora Peak in Oregon. Haven't been top of Bora Peak, and I haven't been to top of Mount Hood. But I've climbed like Mount Rainier 6 times. I've climbed and one of them was the Liberty Ridge route on Mount Rainier. And if you don't know the Liberty Ridge route on Rainier, it's on the north side, and it's it's an infamous route. Been a lot of fatalities on Liberty Ridge. Liberty Ridge is a route that's very difficult once you're on it to retreat. So you're committed to go, all the way over the top on Liberty. So I did Liberty Ridge and different other things. So did a lot of climbing.
You still climb and do all that stuff now?
We slow down. I still do peaks, but I don't do the technical rock climbing, ice climbing, and hard mountain climbing that I used to.
But you're still out there doing
Yeah,
things.
and my wife used to do it with me too, and stuff. But now my wife has developed Parkinson's, and she can't really do a good job of belaying, and it's just harder,
Right.
And so, um, catches up with you. I'm 72 now, so life just catches up.
Yeah.
Still in your heart, you want to do it.
Right.
Never
I mean,
stops.
what's that, Tyree?
So yeah, it might slow down a little bit. It never stops.
No, no, we're still going to be traveling. We still have a lot of things to do. There's places that I've been. I want to take her. I want to take her to New Zealand. I've been to New Zealand twice, working with the New Zealand SAS. I've been to the North Island, South Island, climbed in the South Island. Well, I climbed on the North Island too. Worked with them, and she hasn't been to New Zealand. And New Zealand's a great country. So got to
Y'all ought
go
to
to
go.
New
Y'all ought to
Zealand.
go visit Vietnam. Um,
Yeah, I need to do that too.
that'd be
Uh,
a cool place to go back to. I mean, for you, right? Like considering,
oh yeah,
yeah. But
yeah.
well, Sergeant Major, so I really don't want to have to close this out, but at the same time, like, we're,
Yeah, we can.
uh,
I can send you some more information. There could be other subjects that I was involved in that hasn't been as publicized as some of this other stuff. Some of the missions that we had done planning for, and for some reason, for every 10 missions that we would plan for, like in Delta, maybe we'd only carry out one of them.
right.
So there's a lot of stuff came down that we have to be spun up to do, but for some reason, politics or whatever, um, we never executed that mission.
I will say, uh, Tyree and I, when we do these shows, when we record with people, we don't really have an idea where we want the show to go. And I've listened to a couple of podcasts that you've been on, and obviously have read a couple of books here and there. And you talk. A lot of times the conversation ends up being about, like, like I said, Equal Claw and Urgent Fury and this and that. But I was really happy that we were able to talk about your Vietnam time in those early days, because I feel like, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's not something that people really talk to you much about.
In Vietnam, I went on 380 EOD in 11 months, went 380 EOD incidents. And my longest one lasted me 7 days, and I had a 5 day, but sometimes you do multiple a day. So, but during Vietnam, I went on 380 EOD incidents. I have written the history of Army EOD in Vietnam. I wrote that up. I've wrote up several histories that I'm passing on to the EOD folks. I'm very active involved with the EOD folks. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was down at Kirtland Air Force Base with the 21st Ordnance Company, EOD WMD, and talked to them uh, about our history. And they're, today's EOD folks really want to know our history, how we got started, the people that gone before them that created the path that they're on today. We EOD in the United States bomb disposal started up in World War II, 1942, based on what was going on in Britain during the Battle of Britain. We saw a need because of the way the bombs were being more sophisticated. Germans were dropping delayed bombs. So the Navy and Army set up bomb disposal schools in 1942.
It's that I got to say it's that trip to Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico that helped us get to this point, because my buddy William,
that's right.
Yeah, he told me that he's like, guess who's coming to speak with us? And I was like, I don't know, somebody awesome. And he said, yeah. And I know in the email he said that I begged him to ask you to be on the show, and that is literally what happened.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad that worked out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you, William, for helping me with all this. And for real, like I have been nervous / anticipating the show, because like I said, I've read stories about what you guys did, and I mean, it's just one of those things that you kind of like, I spoke about this before, but like when he and I were active duty, when Tyree and I were active duty, we were stationed in Germany. We were mechanized infantry, and to talk about like going special forces was like it was a far off, unattainable thing, right? Because it wasn't common. I mean, just for somebody to go to ranger school, you had to go to the pre-ranger course, which they held like once or twice the entire time we were in, and then we were deploying a lot, so that's why. But they had PRC, and then you had to get selected from PRC, and they might only select 2 or 3 because they were sending us from Germany back to Fort Benning. And so the chances of us like getting involved in these things were slim to none. And we had the entire time we were active duty, we had one guy, a lieutenant, who was special forces, right? He was previously special forces commissioned and got assigned to us, and he ended up going back to group. But that was our only experience with it, other than the ODA house that we had involvement with in Iraq. But other than that, like just the concept, just the SF, Delta, Ranger, all of those things we knew they existed, but they were way off in the distance and not attainable in our world. I even asked the guy, I told you in 2009, we had those guys come down to Fort Sill. I even asked them, because I was asking, like, what's the biggest differences between the Green Berets and Delta? And he explained, the length of the Q course versus the length of the OTC, learning languages versus not learning languages, doing things versus not doing things, whatever. And I was like, and he said, he made the comment, and he's like, the U.S. government really hasn't even truly admitted that Delta exists today. And I was like, how do you even get involved in that? And he's like, you go online, you apply. And I was like,
Yeah.
What do you mean you go online and apply? I guess once upon a time, or at least in 2009, there was a website where you could enter all your personnel information, where you airborne, Ranger, CIB, EIB, all that stuff. And I did. And I got my rejection letter. And it is my oldest saved email in my Army email. I still have it.
Yeah. During my time, we would do records review. MOS is immaterial. We would go through records, military records, and we'd screen military records. And then you would get a letter that we're going to be at, let's say we're going to be at Fort Richardson, Alaska, at the gymnasium at this time. And you received the letter, and then you'd go to the gymnasium with your letter, and we would have a recruiter. We had a regular Army recruiter. We have an Army recruiting group that's within the unit, but there'd always be a Delta operator at one of these events, and so then we would then show a film, and and then of course you had to, and also a counterintelligence guy. You have to sign non-disclosure statements, and we show the film, and then we would ask after the group if anybody in this group would like to join the organization. And then those volunteers, so we go around to Fort Sill, Fort Riley, and Fort Hood, and be there talking to the people that received the letter. And then we do the 5-event PT test that we had, the old airborne PT test, and then we would do the 100-meter swim. We go to a gym and you have to swim 100 meters with fatigues and your boots on. And the swim is not timed, but in order to go through selection, you have to be a good swimmer, because you're going to have to do river crossings. We've had one drowning death that I told during my time in the selection course. And of course, we do have people spotters there that are unseen at where we know where people are going to do river crossings to aid in any type of rescue. But we do have, that's why we have the swimming requirement. But if you're a weak swimmer, you've been designated as a weak in OTC, you will get additional swimming training in OTC, because we want all of our guys to be strong swimmers. So that's how we've done it. And then out of the 5-event PT test and the swim test, then you would report to the selection course. And today it's at Camp Dawson, West Virginia. It's where we run the selection course. And then you got to do the 5-event PT test, and then you do a 15-mile night road march. That's a timed road march with a 40-pound pack. And then what we do is we go through land nav training. We want to make sure that nobody is disqualified having weak skills in land nav. And you're using the map, and you're using the compass, and so you have to carry the map and compass in one hand, and you carry a unsling weapon in the other hand. The only time you're allowed to sling your weapon is when you're doing river crossings. You're then allowed to sling your weapon, but you have to hand carry that weapon. And of course, carrying an M3 grease gun is next to useless. Trying to beat your way through brush with an M3. But that's kind of how in my time it was done. But we also have the recruiting section, like you said.
Yeah, I'm at May will be 22 years, and so my time is pretty much done in. But if I could go back, knowing what I know now, for sure, I would love to have given a shot. You know what I mean? But it is what it is. At least go right and get told no face to face. But that is what it was.
I enjoyed my time in Delta, and of course in 1992. I went to JSOC 92 to 99. 92 to 96, I was the exercise sergeant major for JSOC. And then 96 to 99, I was the J3 special plans sergeant major in charge of target defeat of hardened targets.
End it.
But that
was that I'm sorry.
I know Tyree disappeared.
Yeah, he probably getting yelled at.
I
right
need
now.
to probably let you guys go, but yeah, we'll plan another one sometime.
I absolutely love that. Yeah, Tyree's probably getting yelled at.
No, just had to.
I'm surprised I'm not yelled
at. Well, yeah, Sergeant Major, greatly appreciate you coming on the show. Like, for real, this has been truly an honor for us to have you, and definitely look forward to another time. Definitely, and thanks to my buddy William for helping set this up and make it happen. I cannot thank you enough.
Okay, till next time.
Till next time. So I'm gonna close this completely out. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to Before I Forget. Please remember to like, listen, share, subscribe, and watch. Even though this one is doing this weird Max Headroom kind of thing, it's still going to be cool. Thank you for listening to Before I Forget, and we'll see you on the next one. Kevin, say bye.
Bye, Kevin.